Well, OCO, and welcome to the webinar on navigating state grants for tribal stewardship. Today's webinar is provided as part of the California Natural Resources Agency's Tribal Stewardship Policy and Toolkit. My name is Geneva E.B. Thompson. I'm a citizen of the Cherokee Nation, she, her pronouns, and I'm very honored to serve as the first ever Deputy Secretary for Tribal Affairs at the California Natural Resources Agency. And thank you so much to all of my colleagues that are joining us here today for their leadership in helping set up today's webinar as part of our Tribal Stewardship Policy Toolkit. The Tribal Stewardship Policy Toolkit and the webinars and resources associated with it are provided for specific toolkit entries that are intended to increase the capacity of tribes, state agencies, non-tribal entities to advance tribal stewardship, including tribal access, collaboration, and ancestral land return, according to the CNRA Tribal Stewardship Policy, which should be announced and finalized early next year. This webinar will be covering resources, best practices, and examples that will help demystify the state grant process for tribes. Agency staff and tribal affairs representatives joining us here today will overview how to seek, successfully apply for, and manage state grants. So Wado, and thank you so much for all the speakers who are joining us here today. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our website. And then the idea for having all these webinars recorded and posted online is so you can go back and refer to them, share them with your colleagues or friends who might not have been able to join us here today. We will have a limited time to answer questions at the end of the presentation and warmly welcome participants to use the chat function to submit your questions for the presenters. Presenters and/or CNRA staff will work to answer your questions in that chat throughout the presentation. If you would like to receive updates and information on the upcoming webinars for the Tribal Stewardship Policy Toolkit, please sign up for our listserv, and we'll put that in the chat for you so you can sign up and get those regular updates. While today's webinar is not considered a tribal consultation, we hope that it will provide resources and information to support tribes in advancing their goals and priorities in the stewardship and conservation of spaces. CNRA always welcomes the opportunity to consult with California Native American tribes, and please do not hesitate to reach out if your tribe would like to schedule a consultation. We'll be presenting and going through a set of slides, and we'll leave time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. Again, please feel free to use the Q&A box feature that is in the bottom of your screen to drop in questions throughout the webinar, and we'll do our best to answer those either throughout the presentations or at the end. So with that, please help me in welcoming our speakers that are here for Navigating State Grants for Tribal Stewardship. We have a great list of speakers here today. First, we have Shivani Varela as the supervisor of the California Grants Portal and website services for the California State Library. In her role, she leads a team to build the California Grants Portal and continues to ensure that grant seekers and grant makers have a good user experience with the site. And so with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand it off to Shivani.
Thank you so much, Geneva. Thank you for having me here. I am hoping that you can see my screen and this resource can really be useful for all of you to take back to your communities and utilize for finding grant opportunities in the state of California in a central place. So I am today presenting you California Grants Portal, grants.ca.gov. Again, it is a central place for state agencies to enter grant opportunities. A bit of a background of where this came from and why the site is even existent. It is part of the legislation AB 2252, which requires all state agencies to put competitive first come first serve, including loans and federal assistance funds into this website at the same time they go live on their site. So with that said, it does not have non-competitive grant opportunities. That doesn't mean that some departments don't put those in if they want to, but it's not mandated by the legislation. The other legislation that's driving the force behind this site is AB 132, section 8334.1. Mouthful, but it basically requires all state agencies to now provide us post-award information on and after July 1, 2022, all the grants that close. So that's number of applications, number of awardees, and who individually received the grant awards. So a lot of information in this site. So I'm going to actually touch on some of the tool tips or how to use and navigate this tool. Hopefully it's simple enough for all of you to take back and use this tool going forward to find grant opportunities. So with that said, this is the home page. Right on top, you can actually start filtering and figuring out what you would like to look for. So I'm going to actually walk through this, and then we can go into more of advanced search in a minute. So and you're going to pick applicant type. So tribal government here includes state and federal. So you can select tribal government. And then you're going to go to categories, and you can select out of these high level categories. The reason why they're high level is to ensure that you don't miss out on opportunities that could be potentially tagged with other departments that provide grant opportunities in those areas, right? So if you were to look for environment and water grant opportunities, you can select multiple categories here. My recommendation is to try to do as many as you need to initially, and then you can do advanced search to filter as well. Time frame is really important for those organizations that like to plan ahead in the future. So this is driven based on the application deadline put in by the state agencies. So let's say you have a grant, you want to look at the grant opportunity that's closing in 6 months. So do you have planning time to contact the grant state agency to understand a bit more? You can do that as well. So you can filter it by them. So once you've done your filters here, you'll say, show me the opportunities, and it'll filter down to based on your selection. Or you can say, show me everything, and it will show you everything that we have on the grants portal currently available. Down below, you can actually search by different avenues, the same information, so more visually appealing ways. Down here, you'll see the recently posted. That gives you a better understanding how often the grant opportunities are being added. Again, they are added by the state agencies and managed by them. So depending on when it's open for application, they will be posting it here. So you can see there are grant opportunities posted a couple of days ago, a week ago, gives you a better outlook on that. Down below, there's a quick statistic there. 161 grant opportunities currently forecasted or active on the grants portal, $16 billion currently available in funding. So there's a lot of money out there and opportunities available for you to search through. So we're going to actually go into Find Grants, which is the same place will take you for Show Me Everything. Find Grants gives you advanced search opportunity to be able to put in a keyword search. You can filter by the department. If you know a department that you always like to look at grant opportunity for, you can again select by category. You can also do disbursement method, which assists you in finding grant opportunities that might be just reimbursement or advance and reimbursement. Or a mixture of both. And then you can also say do not show. So if, like I mentioned, our grant opportunity definition includes loans and federal assistance funds. So if you don't want to see loan opportunities, you can tell the filter, you know what, I don't want to see loan opportunities, take them out. You can also deselect the matching fund. So if you don't want to see grant opportunities with matching fund, you can do that. The default is always going to show you forecasted and active. So forecasted are not mandated by the legislation, but the departments put those out if they have the information to put out for upcoming grant opportunities in the future. So you won't always see forecasted grant opportunities in the portal. However, active are required. And then again, you can see the closed opportunity as well. So I want to do a quick search here because our keyword search actually has a tooltip in the corner. It tells you what it searches for. It searches for anything in the text. So for instance, if you put something in this keyword search, if it's mentioned on the title or the description or any text field, it will pop up as a result. Okay, so in this case, I'm just going to do a quick search for mental health. And I want to see forecasted active. I'm going to apply a filter here. And currently there's only one grant opportunity available. That's open, that's active. It tells you right there in the deadline down below. If you wanted to see what had been posted in the previous times, because sometimes what happens is if you might put a keyword search in here or you add a filter, you may not see any results, right? Doesn't mean that there are no grant opportunities. It just means that there are no grant opportunities currently available. So a lot of times what I would do is do a closed as well, and then apply a filter. And I want to see there might be some annual grant opportunities or rounds that potentially have been posted in the past. So as you can see, this one says 5th funding round, right? So we don't know if they might have a 6th funding round, or it might say round one, and that might potentially mean there's additional rounds that are coming up. Okay, so it's a great way to kind of learn what might be available in the future. And you can see the detail page of the grant opportunity by clicking the title. One thing I do want to note, the contact information is required per the legislation for all grant opportunities for the State Department. So they are required to give us a phone number and an email address. So great way to make sure that you contact the department directly about a grant that you might be interested in or have questions about. They are the subject matter experts. If for any reason you are having a hard time getting through them, or you're not receiving, it could be a typo there or something, and email bounce back, you can always email us and we can assist you and connect you with them. Last couple things I'm going to note is save current refinements. So this is a great way to not have to search for the same grant opportunity coming into the filter. So so when you click on that, it's going to save everything you have filtered so far. So far I have the mental health as a keyword search. I want to see forecasted after closed. And you can select any of these categories and hit save. What it does is it drops a cookie in your browser. You can come back on your browser and it will filter the same information that you already have saved. If you clear your cache on your browser, it will go away. So you'll have to add it again, just throwing that out there. So you'll have to add this refinement again. If you don't want to come to the portal every single day and be like, what's new on the portal, you can subscribe to our subscribe notifications, which is daily or weekly digest of everything that gets added by the state agencies on the portal. So you can say, I want to see all new grant opportunities, or you can select by the category. So it's so one or the other. If you select multiple categories, you may see duplicate emails in your mailbox because sometimes a grant might be tagged with both of those categories. So just note that. But that notification is very helpful if to assist you in planning as you are looking through grant opportunities and don't want to come to the portal every single day. For contact, if you have any questions about the portal or needs assistance with the department, you can contact us via our email box here, caggrantsportal@library.ca.gov, or you can fill out the form and we'll get back to you during the business hours. Okay. That's pretty much an overview of the grants portal. I'm going to hand it back so you guys can learn more about other opportunities.
Well, Wado, and thank you so much for walking us through all of that. I know the grants portal is such a helpful tool that many people rely on, and so just a huge thank you to the State Library for setting it up, keeping it organized, and always being such a wonderful partner, not only to the Natural Resources Agency, but to all of the different grantees out there who are looking for those state dollars. So thank you for walking us through that. And again, as a friendly reminder, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A chat feature and we can start answering those questions for you. So thank you again for being here and sharing with us about the State Grants Portal. And so now I'm very excited to have my colleague Andeep join us and talk a little bit more about navigating state grant programs for tribal stewardship. And so Andeep is in my office, and we're so excited and so glad to have Ann with us in the Tribal Affairs team. And they serve as the manager for tribal funding here at the California Natural Resources Agency, and is also the lead author in a really amazing resource that they put together in partnership with different grant administrators and grant leaders across agency, and thinking about how to reduce barriers that tribes face in accessing those state dollars. And so, Ann, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for walking us through this amazing resource that you put together. And I will hand it off to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Geneva. I'm excited to be here. Next slide, please. Yes. Perfect. As we're getting to the first slide, I just want to say, as a overview, my hope and my goal for this presentation is that if somebody who's completely new or somebody who's also a veteran to the state grant process, you'll learn some helpful tips and tricks to navigate state grants programs, and also just kind of like to understand the way the state is trying to make things better too, and how these two things can complement each other. Next slide, please. And so I want to first talk to you about this idea about the language of grants. So the state of California has our goals and priorities that we wish to advance. So common ones here within this space, at least, that you might have heard before are 30 by 30, nature-based solutions, natural working lands. And so state grant programs are a way for the state to really invest in these projects and actions to advance those priorities and goals and put dollars into the hands of local regional actors, essentially. And so the way I like to think about it is that state grant solicitation and guidelines are how the state is communicating what it's looking to fund and the conditions of accepting that funding. And so a successful grant application starts with understanding how to speak the language of grants, aka breaking down those long, complicated documents to understand what information the state needs to understand your project, essentially, and how it aligns with state priorities. Next slide, please. And so before you dive into those long, complicated grant guidelines, which I'm sure many folks in this room know could be upwards to 70, 90 pages, how do you determine whether or not that program is the right match, whether or not, like, it's the right grant for you before investing all that time and energy into reading those documents? And so the first tip and trick I want to offer is to understand project eligibility. When you're scanning through those grant guidelines and those grant documents, really review the eligible applicant criteria section and review the eligible versus ineligible activities section. This will help you understand who can apply and what can be funded. And if the grant solicitation is competitive, reviewing that competitive selection criterion, reviewing the scoring rubric, it'll help you kind of start to understand the lens that the grant program is looking at and what they're looking to prioritize and where your project may fall within that. Next slide, please. And so I want to take back and just really acknowledge that while the state is working to advance and improve our equity inclusiveness within our grant programs, existing limits may dictate what funding can or can't be used for. So for example, statutory requirements may dictate specific limitations and specific conditions of accepting that funding. So questions that you may want to ask yourself as an applicant is what aspects of the current project can be changed to either meet eligibility requirements or to enhance overall competitiveness. And really the heart of this is if I edit or remove component A, does it still meet my tribe's goals and priorities? Fully acknowledging that we want to support the good work that's being done on the ground, but also how do we find this nice middle ground to get you the funding that you need while also matching those statutory requirements or programmatic requirements that the state grant program has set forth. And so if you feel good about proceeding after asking both these questions, you're ready to dive into the grant guidelines. Next slide, please. And so the overall anatomy of a grant program, and this is how I kind of think about structuring things or breaking things down. I like to understand what the head, heart, the feet of an object is essentially to understand essentially the components to understand the whole. And so I want to flag that even though, grant programs and their components will differ program to program, here are some common pieces that you may see across the NRA grant programs. So first and foremost, we have the grant guidelines, the heart, if you will, that really kind of communicates everything that you will need to understand what the grant program is trying to achieve, what they're asking of you, and those conditions once again. The project proposal is then what you will use to communicate to the state your project, and then of course supporting documentation. This is where things might vary the most across grant programs depending on what, again, the spirit of the grant program is, the scope of the work trying to be achieved, and also various other statutory requirements. Next slide, please. So to dive into the grant guidelines, I like to think about this as the state's who, what, where, when, why, and how. Essentially, it tells you who's eligible for the application, what projects are eligible, when will the project need to take place, when do projects have to be completed. So these are your funding expenditure, encumbrance deadlines. Where do the projects need to take place? Is there a geographic restriction? Perhaps this is a regional type of grant that has to take place in the Bay Area versus a statewide grant. Why does your project meet the program's priorities and goals? So going back to those competitive criteria, that scoring rubric, like, really, why is your project, achieving and advancing these priorities, and how should the projects be administered? Are there special considerations? Are there special types of like recording or reporting that needs to happen? And so a tip I would like to offer when reading the guidelines, pay special attention to the above. And if the guidelines are unclear and you can't answer these questions or find that information, follow up with the grant program's point of contact. Next slide, please. And so the project proposal, reflectively and conversely, the grant guidelines are the state's who, what, when, why, and how. The project proposal is the applicants who, what, where, when, why, and how. So this is where you get to communicate that you are an eligible applicant because the project proposal, does what, and the project will take place when, and all those things, all those details to answer those questions. And so a tip I would like to offer here is that if the guidelines reference specific state strategies, goals, priorities, go to those source documents and connect your project to those sources. These documents, these strategies will most likely offer language that so you can see how the state is framing things, and then you could mirror as well, so that way you don't have to reinvent the wheel when you're writing your application. Next slide, please. And supporting documentation. As I mentioned earlier, this is where there might be a lot of flexibility, but the most common pieces across grant programs are often the signed authorizing resolution or certification letter. And just using our grant program, Tribal Nature-Based Solutions, as an example, this program, the eligible applicants are all tribes, but non-tribal entities can apply on behalf and in partnership. And so we use this to essentially ensure that there is support and proof of partnership from the tribal council, from the tribal community that the applicant, the non-tribal applicant, is claiming to support. And then, of course, eligibility statements, payee data records, so that way we can get you those good funds. And so a tip I would like to offer for this component is that you should create a checklist as you go through and map out these timelines. Some of these documents might be very easy to get. It might be a quick call to your financial department to be like, hey, can you send me this? And other documents like the authorizing resolution, especially if it has to go through tribal council, has to go through all those timelines and processes. And so as you kind of map out and identify what is needed, also start thinking in your head sort of like a schedule, if you will, of getting those documents. Next slide, please. And so after you're all ready to do that and you're ready to sit down and dig through those guidelines, here are some general tips that I would offer. Read the guideline in its entirety. I know that, we're trying our best at the state to make these as straightforward as possible, but the information that does get included in the guidelines are meant to be as inclusive and all-encompassing to kind of help answer any potential questions, as well as really reach the breadth and width of all the types of projects that the program could offer and support. And so strongly recommend reading it in its entirety. And as you do, make note of the following. Any questions you may have for grant staff. Like I said, we're not perfect. We're human. We may think that we're writing this as clear as possible. So if you have questions, please let us know. How to submit, is this strictly online only through a portal, or can we do this via email, or could it be mailed in? Key deadlines, is this a hard deadline submission grant program, or is there rolling flexibility, as well as points of contacts? I would also make notes of any resources the grant program is offering. Are there technical assistance resources? Are there office hours coming up? Are there scheduled application webinars that you could take advantage of? And for the last two, any definitions or key sections impacting your project. So this goes back to that eligibility component I spoke of, and any examples provided, especially in the templates. This is the grant program or the grant staff's way of trying to show you hey, this is the language, or this is how we're looking for this information in this format. Next slide, please. And lastly, I would be remiss if I didn't go over these key sections that really impact our tribal applicants. I want to talk again about complementing state strategies and policies. These really are useful in shaping your application by highlighting your project support and how it spans across different policies, while also providing you with sort of an example language that you could mirror to really see how the state is trying to frame things. I would also highlight funding authority. I mentioned earlier that statutory requirements and those limitations of limitations around accepting funding, really note the source of the money, as this will tell you, like, what we can or can't spend it on in those conditions. So for example, for land acquisition dollars, does it require conservation easement to be put on it in perpetuity? Is there specific terms that easement has, and does it conflict with the spirit and the intent of the project that you're wanting to do? And then, of course, limited waivers of sovereign immunity. Does the grant program require one? And if so, what are those conditions? And are the terms negotiable? And then lastly, eligible funded activity definitions. Going back to that eligibility component again, how narrow or inclusive? There's the statutory requirements that outline in law what the grant program has to do. And there's also the programmatic definitions that the grant staff is putting forth in their interpretation of this. So understanding where the program is flexible, inflexible, could also help you have more meaningful conversations with the grant program staff. Next slide, please. And with that, you're ready to apply. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, Otto, and thank you so much, Anne. Really appreciate you walking us through all this. And I know that our colleague Cindy Anderson is putting in the chat additional information and resources and thinking through and applying for state grant programs. So just huge thank you, Anne. Really appreciate you walking us through all that. And now, very excited to introduce to you all Cassidy McSturdy, who is joining us as the grant manager with the Department of Conservation's Division of Land Resources Protection, and is primarily administering the grants within the Sustainable Agricultural Land Conservancy Program, which is also lovingly known as SALC. Through this role, Cassidy has led the program's tribal outreach and policy development and implementation of the state's Racial Equity Action Plan. So Cassidy, thank you so much for being here and walking us through an example grant program that I think a lot of folks are very interested in learning more about. Any insights that you have on how to be a successful applicant through the SALC program would be warmly welcomed. And as Cassidy's coming online, I just also wanted to let folks know that the SALC program, it is a wonderful program that can help fund with property acquisition. So for tribes that are looking for those state dollars that can help with ancestral land return, highly recommend taking a peek at the SALC program. And with that, Cassidy, I'll hand it off to you.
Great. Thank you, Geneva. Thank you all for having me here today. So I'll be providing that overview generally of the SALC program, just to orient you all with what it is that we are working on. We've got a few different program options, and then also going into how our program meets tribes' needs, where we offer assistance with applications, and what resources there may be if you're interested in SALC. So head to the next slide here. All right, and then I'll just go to that next one. Thank you. So the Sustainable Ag Lands Conservation Program is a component of the Strategic Growth Council's Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program. The Department of Conservation, in conjunction with CNRA, administer the SALC program on behalf of the Strategic Growth Council. And so the principal goals of SALC are to protect agricultural lands, to support infill and compact development, contribute to carbon neutrality and build climate resilience, safeguard economic sustainability and food security, protect biodiversity, enable enduring conservation of working lands, and to advance equity and opportunity for all regions of California. Next slide. So there's 3 components to the SALC program, and they're all focused on agricultural conservation. The SALC program utilizes greenhouse gas reduction funds to protect agricultural lands that are at risk of conversion to other uses. And more broadly, the goal of the SALC program is to promote smart growth by protecting critical agricultural lands from conversion to urban or residential uses, to support healthy and resilient agricultural economies, and that's in order to provide food security and avoid future greenhouse gas emissions through the protection of those lands. And we just awarded our 10th round of grants and are looking forward to applications for our 11th round in the coming months. And we have 3 project types. Oh, if you could just head back there one more. I'll just go over the 3 project types quickly here. So we do offer land use planning grants. Those are designed to support the development of local and regional land use policies and economic development strategies to protect critical agricultural lands. We also offer capacity and project development grants. So those are designed to expand organizational capacity in order to develop conservation acquisition projects, and acquisition grants. And this is kind of our biggest piece of the pie here. Those are designed to permanently protect croplands, rangelands, and lands utilized for the cultivation of traditional resources from conversion to non-agricultural uses. And we do that through the acquisition of voluntary permanent agricultural conservation easements or fee title purchases of private lands. And I do want to note we are currently not offering capacity grants with this round 11, but we do hope to have those funds available in future funding rounds. So for today's purposes, I'll be focusing on our current offerings, which are planning and acquisition grants. But I did want to identify capacity grants are a goal of ours to bring back in the future, and they've been really helpful, particularly for tribes and organizations that are newer to the acquisition process. Next slide. But before I go into those programs, I do think it's important to note how our program intersects with tribal needs and land uses. So you probably heard I use the word agriculture a lot, and that's because that's part of our funding guidelines and our mandate for what we're proposing to conserve, which is agricultural lands. And so for the purposes of SALC, agricultural uses do include cultivation and tillage of soil, dairying, cultivation, growing, and harvesting of any agricultural commodity, and any practices performed by a farmer or on a farm as incident to or in conjunction with farming operations. But this definition also includes gathering and activities that promote healthy trees, shrubs, and perennial forbs for the sustainable agricultural cultivation of traditional foods, herbal medicine, fibers such as basketry material, and dyes, so long as such activities are led by or conducted in partnership with a California Native American tribe or members thereof. So we did work to expand that definition to formally acknowledge tribal agricultural activities so that tribal projects are eligible under our guidelines standalone and do not require conventional agricultural practices in order to be eligible for acquisition funds. Next slide. So quickly, I'll give a planning grants overview. The focus of our planning grants is to develop plans that conserve agricultural lands by designing and implementing land use policies and accompanying strategies that reduce the threat of conversion to non-agricultural uses and reduce vehicle miles traveled. Our planning grants may also recognize and protect other co-benefits of conserving agricultural lands, such as habitat benefits. And this component of SALC incentivizes local, regional, and tribal governments to work closely with stakeholders to develop land use policies and plans that integrate agricultural land conservation into their overall goals. Ideally, these would be plans that have some teeth. They'd be tied to local regional planning and not just something that sits on a shelf. And so we've had some really great planning projects. We currently have 2 planning grants with tribal governments working to look at land conservation strategies within their territories. Next slide, please. So quickly, I'll just go over, as Anne mentioned, one of the big things to look at is, eligible applicants and grant award amounts. And so we do have projects available for California Native American tribes, cities, counties, LAFCOs, councils of government, municipal planning organizations, regional transportation planning or groundwater sustainability agencies, special districts with land use or transportation planning authority. The grant awards are up to $500,000 maximum grant awards, and we do not require match funding for tribal applicants. Generally, tribal or match funding is required at a 10% match. Next slide, please. And now we'll go into our acquisition grants overview. There are two components, two types of agricultural conservation acquisition grants that are funded through SALC. The first is the purchase of conservation easements. We will cover up to 90% of the appraised value of the agricultural conservation easement. We do allow for up to 100% funding for California Native American tribes for those. And those are purchase of an easement on privately owned land. The title doesn't transfer in this case. It's just that conservation easement is placed on that private land, and then it's managed and maintained by whoever it is that purchases that easement. So it could be a tribal entity, it could be a nonprofit. We also offer purchase of fee title. And so we will cover up to 90% of the agricultural conservation easement value of the property's fair market value. However, California Native American tribes, again, are eligible for up to 100% funding. So we would purchase the full fee title cost. Those projects are held to the same eligibility criteria and scored by the same selection criteria as easement projects. So it's really just looking at, is a conservation easement more in alignment with the goals of your organization or entity, or is the outright ownership in fee preferred? And with purchase of fee title, we do have minimum deed terms, so there are some requirements as far as how that land is then used, but it's something that we work with on a case-by-case basis. We try to be as flexible as possible so that we're able to meet tribal applicant needs as well as the requirements of our funding source. We'll head to that next slide. All right, and so again, eligible applicants include cities, counties, nonprofit organizations, RCDs, California Native American tribes, regional park or open space districts and authorities. And it can note here that tribal nonprofits and tribal non-serving nonprofits are also acknowledged and are eligible applicants. And we have in our definitions and in our guidelines how that's treated differently in different scenarios where partnership exists. So we tried to really capture what those different scenarios might look like. But if you had any questions, SALC's staff is always available to help you discern where you might fall into with eligibility. And we don't have a maximum award amount for our easements. We do offer up to 100% of easement value to projects that are applied for by California Native American tribes or tribal nonprofits, where they're either an applicant or co-applicant. And again, we do offer up to 100% of fair market value for fee title acquisitions for property that is applied for by a California Native American tribe or tribal nonprofit. And we also pay for associated costs. Generally, that's up to $60,000 for associated costs. So that's, your staff time putting together documentation, your appraisal. We also offer up to $10,000 in addition to that $60,000 if you had wanted to put together a carbon farming plan or a management plan. And that's something in the application stage you can also work with staff to discern, is this something we want to move forward with? What does that mean as far as long-term management of the property, et cetera? We're always available to answer any questions there. And I did also want to note with this round, we did incorporate potential for advanced pay for tribal applicants. And that's something also, if you were interested in that, you'd want to let staff know as soon as possible if your project were awarded, and then they'd really help you discern what the standards are for advanced pay, but we do offer that now, which is really exciting. We were finally able to incorporate that into our guidelines. All right, next slide here. And so now I'll go into applications and awards timelines. So if you are interested in the SALT program, we did recently kind of change up our schedule. It used to be once annual applications and awards. And we, in response to feedback regarding co-funding availability and the need for more frequent SALC awards to respond to emergent opportunities, we did switch to a rolling application and twice annual awards. And so we're hopeful that this helps because, we are a very consistent funding source. Not all funding sources are year after year available. And so we're also willing to be first in. So if you did have other match funders you were working with, SALC is willing to be the first funder. And so for those reasons, we recognize our role as kind of needing to be available more often so that if you do have co-funding opportunities, you're able to also go for those and be eligible for those with SALC's backing already there. So this slide shows an overview of the pre-proposal, application, and grant award timelines for these upcoming rounds. As I mentioned, we are moving into round 11 already. We just awarded round 10 in October and, hit the ground running this year. So trying to really get this rolling and again, having that funding available more frequently. And so this change that we recently made included breaking our pre-proposal phase into two separate phases. This was in order to reduce workload on both sides as a means of determining project eligibility early, so that our applicants aren't investing a ton of time into something that just isn't going to be able to move forward into that phase 2, where it gets into the nitty-gritty about like title review and just requires a little bit more work in that regard. And so we are accepting those phase 1 and phase 2 pre-proposals year round. You could submit it any day, anytime. Our only requirement is that if you are hoping to apply for a grant, that you don't submit that phase 2 sooner than a month prior to when that grant application is due. So we do have applications due in January and July. If you were wanting to apply in January, we would ask that you don't submit that phase 2 less than a month prior. So before, after December. And that's just to give staff adequate time to really provide the feedback for this project to be successful. And so, as I mentioned, our applications yearly will be in January and July, with awards in April and October. So if you were to apply in January, awarded in April. If you were to apply in July, awarded in October. And that should be consistent in coming years. We will every year put out a notice of funding availability. So you should be aware of what the offerings are that year in those timelines. And I'll just move on to our next slide here. And so I also wanted to mention SALC's technical assistance options. As Anne went through, these application processes and grants can be a lot. And so we just really prioritize technical assistance in order to help you understand whether or not this is the program for you, help you navigate our application process and eligibility, and then also even when it comes into management of existing grants, staff is really keen on making sure that we meet regularly, that we're here to support. We're not just asking for things and leaving you in the dark. We're partners and wanting to have that be the case from start to finish. I'll look at our next slide here, and I'll start wrapping up because I know we're moving on in time. So again, technical assistance is provided by SALC staff. We also currently have a consultant team, which is Helianth Partners. They've been providing technical assistance to potential applicants. Their contract will be up at the end of this year, but staff is looking as well at additional consultant RFPs so that we can have that, third-party technical assistance provider. It can also just be nice, to have somebody who's kind of an expert maybe in that grant writing field be available. So that's something we're looking at as well. We currently have it, but we'll hopefully have more in the future. And then we have our workshops and office hours. We are regularly holding those. If you are interested in those, a great way to be made aware of that is by signing up for SALC's listserv. We do send out information anytime we hold an event. We also have some online resources. If you go to the SALC website, we've got managing your grant resources, guideline resources. Recently, the Department of Conservation brought on as well a tribal liaison, Crystal Blue, who is amazing and has put together a beautiful tribal affairs landing page for the Department of Conservation. So you can also head there for more information, Department and Division of Land Resource Protection wide, and for support. And so that's another space that you can go outside of just our SALC program that can provide some really great support and resources. And I'll get our next slide here. And that's it. Thank you all for having me and for hearing about SALC. And if you're interested in our programs, please reach out. We'd love to hear from you.
Well, Watto, and thank you so much, Kathy. I really appreciate you walking us through SALC and all of the cool opportunities that these state dollars can open up and be available for tribes as they're thinking about ancestral land return. I know you talked about conservation easements. That's a great way of thinking through co-management and tribal access to lands. And really with this idea of tribal stewardship and traditional foods and really dovetailing, right? Tribal stewardship and care for the lands as well as feeding our communities. So just thank you so much for walking us through this. I also really appreciate how you kind of pointed out throughout the program all the different kind of touch points and opportunities to connect with state grant programs administrators, right? And that technical assistance, which I think is really key as you're wanting, as tribes are going through these processes. I find that if you communicate more, it's a smoother process. So just thank you so much for highlighting all of the amazing work that you and your team are doing. And the SALC program is such a great program that I recommend many folks take a look at. And so now I'm so excited to introduce to you all Anna Howell, who is joining us as the paralegal with the Office of Attorney General for the Rincon Band of Luiseño Indians. Her work includes a wide variety of things, but specifically as it relates to today's webinar, collaborating and preparing and selected grant applications, such as the Tribal Nature-Based Solutions Grant Program. We had such an honor working closely with you, Anna, throughout the Tribal Nature-Based Solutions grant process. I know me and my team that was administering this grant program always appreciated the collaborating with you and thinking through these processes so we can get these dollars out of the state and to Rincon, especially for this amazing ancestral land return project that you all have been leading. So thank you for being here, and I'm so excited to hear your perspective of navigating a state grant process.
Well, hello, thank you so much. I am so grateful to be here, and thank you for inviting me, Geneva, and the CNRA team has been amazing to work with. I also want to thank the Rincon Band of Luiseño Indians for the privilege of being here on their behalf to talk about this. I'm hoping to share what I believe will be what I believe are some points and regarding the processes that we went through as the tribe navigated the application as well as the award. I'll be brief. We don't have a lot of time. Let's see. I wanted to first mention that the process of working with the CNRA was delightful in terms of when problems or issues were identified. it was a true collaborative process to resolve them. And I am grateful to everyone at CNRA who really stepped in and pulled for us. And I thank you for that. So, you know, as a process for a tribe working to prepare their application, that process was supported through webinars, and I believe you called it office hours. That was really helpful in answering questions on the spot. And I can't comment about what will happen with this next round, but certainly I can thank you for that. In terms of how we dealt with issues that arose, I wanted to mention the two that were dealt with successfully. The first, most important for the tribe, was the fact that the tribe wishes to bring its the land that was their ancestral lands that were paid that were purchased through the grant money for the Tribal Nature-Based Solutions Program into trust for the tribes, into trust with the United States for the tribes, for the tribe. Because you can't encumber or speak on behalf of the federal government, there was some language that needed to be worked out. And because there is a need for a deed restriction, perpetual easement for the conservation for this money. And that was something that was arrived at both by the tribe negotiating and talking to those FEDA Trust authorities at the BIA, as well as with Geneva's team. And that is something that, as a tribe applying, if you wish to have that land brought into trust once you're granted, or once you receive a grant, that would be something that would be important to work out. And so I wanted to point that out as one of the tribe's issues that it did successfully resolve, we believe. We're still waiting. We don't know for certain, because you know, the FEDA Trust process it needs to be undergone still with this property. But the second issue that we did discover needed a bit of finessing and timing, really, more than anything else. And again, the tribe in the CNRA team worked together to resolve that, was just in closing. So, you know, I guess what I'm highlighting these two issues for, and it did work out perfectly, actually, in the end, is that you'll have support. You'll have support both pre-application and post-application, and through the grant process. Okay, so with that said, I'd like to hopefully have some slides here, which I hope will be helpful in pointing out the tribe's process in its application and how it addressed, you know, the how it addressed its application and meeting the state's programs and goals through its let's see, the two natural working lands climate smart strategy that you'll be looking at, as well as the pathways to 30 by 30 strategy. And apologies, I had to look at my notes. Okay, so this is a picture of the actual, if you wouldn't mind just going back for a sec. I just wanted to show you. This is the land. This is the view from the land. This is the view of the reservation from the land that was purchased. So as you can see, it's gorgeous. Okay, next slide, please. So what we focused on in the application was how the project will increase equity, it conserves and protects, you can read this for yourself, conserves and protects biodiversity and benefits public health. I'll just focus on those more or less. And again, this, you know, these are just examples. You obviously will construct your own application based upon your own needs, but I was hoping that this would be something that would be useful for tribes that are applying for the next round. Okay, next slide, please. So, I mean, first and foremost, ancestral land return does exactly this. It helps address historical inequity. and it's healing. So that is where, you know, the tribe focused on that. The tribe focused on that point for this grant. Okay, next, please. Slide. As far as conserving and protecting diversity, the connectivity of the wildlife habitat for that property is really profound. It is a huge amount of land. It's 599.2 acres. It will basically allow for that habitat, which, by the way, we have conducted the biological surveys, and we do know that there is just, you know, a lot of wildlife up there. So it's just really important in terms of the connectivity that will remain for the property. So we focused on that as well. The preservation of the existing native habitat, which is at least 90%, along with invasive species removal. That's where the tribe focused, you know, in terms of meeting the and you know, for it would have regardless, but that does meet the state's objectives. Okay, next slide, please. So benefit public health. I mean, in addition to the healing that it will bring to the tribe, as far as the return of ancestral lands that are important to the Luiseño people, this is something that the tribe will be able to build upon as it and thrive within. So anyway, this was the other focus that we had about the varying ways that it would benefit public health. I mean, one of the major issues the tribe faces is its potable water. It relies almost entirely upon the aquifer that is fed by the San Luis River. So this is this property feeds into that watershed, and it's because there are, I think, 6 ephemeral streams. It is a very important benefit to the tribe and its public health. And last but not least, again, mitigation of the wildfire risk that it is very high in this region by removing the non-native habitat and restoring the native habitat, again, which is extremely significant on that property. There's just a great deal of native habitat already, and it's very wonderful land. Okay, I think the next slide is really where the tribe talked about its ability to do this work. And I just wanted to mention that because, you know, it is something that I think was very helpful for the CNRA to look at in looking at our application, knowing that the tribe has a lot of regulatory authority that it currently and has been exercising. And then I think the last slide, please, is a thank you. Okay, well, that's pretty much it. So that's what I really wanted to help with. I'm hoping that if you have any questions, you know, or concern, well, not concerns, but if you would like to talk about this further, I'm available. And thank you so much for your time and your attention. You take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Anna. I really appreciate you walking us through it. And I know that here at agency, we were so excited not only to see Rincon's application come in, but to work closely with you and the rest of your team in this whole kind of property acquisition process. And I am so glad that you brought up the fee to trust kind of piece there, because I think especially through this project in partnership with Rincon, we learned a lot about that process as well. And that was something that I think we had our growing moment on. It's like, oh, how do we honor and respect and get out of the way of that fee to trust process, knowing that having tribal stewardship, ownership, jurisdiction over lands is actually going to be a good thing, not only for Rincon and Ural's members, but also the land and the species that are now going to be cared for under Rincon's leadership. And so I just wanted to say thank you for your patience with us, and thank you for your partnership as we navigated that process and really, I think, collaboratively shaped an outcome that I hope it all goes well, and that we'll see these lands better protected because of it. So just thank you for your leadership in that space. And I think the kind of broader point I hope folks are seeing here is grant programs can be an iterative process, and it can be a back and forth conversation. And so as you're going through these processes here at the state of California, it's always good to reach out to the departments that you're applying for, ask those questions, see where the needle can be moved to support your tribe's priorities. So just want to thank you, Anna, for sharing your expertise and your time and energy, not only throughout this grant program, but also here today with everyone who's joining. I know folks have learned a little bit more about how to navigate state processes because of that. So thank you.
Thank you, Geneva. I really appreciate it. I mean, and I am very grateful for the opportunity to be here, as well as all of what we've learned from you and from your team, and looking forward to the future and making this project a reality. We have the land.
We got the land. Congratulations. It's so exciting.
So great.
I know when it closed,
So exciting.
Everyone on the team was like, yes, Rincon's property closed. So we all celebrating. So
oh my goodness,
just
yes.
congrats.
All right. Well, thank you.
All right. And so I know that we're a little bit over. I know that people have been submitting questions in the Q&A, and thank you for the team who's been answering those questions. We will be sure to follow up on anything that has come up. I'm doing a quick skim to see if we've got a good one here. It looks like a lot of questions have been answered, so thank you, everyone. Doing a quick skim. Awesome. Thanks, Cassidy, for all of your resources that you're sharing here in the chat. All right. Well, because we're a little over, any outstanding questions, we'll be sure to follow up with you all. So please keep submitting those. But again, really appreciate you all being here today. It's a true honor to just share some space with you, as well as thinking through how state grant programs can be utilized to support tribal stewardship. We have our upcoming webinar, which is we'll be talking about cutting the green tape for tribal stewardship. We'll have experts from tribes as well as our departments here at agency thinking through how do we streamline and smooth out some processes to make it easier to get good restoration projects on the landscape. And so please join us on December 16th from 2 to 3 p.m. for Cutting the Green Tape for Tribal Stewardship. Again, this webinar is going to be overview of the Cutting the Green Tape initiative, restoration permitting pathways for broadly for tribal audiences, right? The topics are going to include how to use Cutting the Green Tape, how it can be useful to tribes, overview of the available resources for navigating restoration permitting pathways, and attendees will hear from tribal representatives who have utilized these tools to implement restoration projects, including staff from the Yurok tribe who will be discussing their really cool project they've been leading in the Scott River Restoration Farmers Ditch Project, as well as Colfax Todd's Valley Consolidated Tribes who will be discussing their intertribal eco-cultural restoration crew project. So we'll get some good more cultural fire there on the landscape. So I hope you all can join us. Please feel free to register on the link on the screen. Again, December 16th from 2 to 3 p.m. Again, Wado, and thank you so much for joining us here today for the Navigating State Grants for Tribal Stewardship webinar. A recording of this webinar and the associated materials will be shared on our website shortly. If you would like to receive updates and more information on the upcoming webinars for the Tribal Stewardship Policy Toolkit, please sign up for our listserv. You'll see the QR code here. If you've got your cell phone, you can scan that right now and sign up on our listserv. Or you can use this link that we have here. And my colleague my colleague Sydney Anderson will be posting that link in the chat as well. And huge Wado, and thank you, Sydney, for all of your leadership and work and putting today's webinar together and sharing all those resources with everyone. So with that, again, Wado, and thank you so much for spending your morning with us. And I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day. Have a good one, everyone.